5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And it's live.
This is Leicester Till I Die TV. Watch and subscribe on YouTube and listen on your podcast platform.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, good night, good day, goodbye, hello, wherever you are in the world, one of those will apply to you. This is LTID TV, bringing you the latest news, which changes daily, on who is the favourite to be our manager. Thank you for joining us. If you are watching live, please join in the chat. If you're watching on catch-up, stick your comments in the description below. And if you are listening via your favourite podcast platform, whatever that may be, thank you for lending me your ears. So, it's Tuesday, it must be Belgium, as they say. Gary O'Neill, a front runner for the Leicester job. I did say that if Gary O'Neill gets the job, that I'm going to go off and support Nottingham Forest. Now, I couldn't really go that far, but I am wearing red. Just that, just note that. But apparently, Gary O'Neill has said that if he gets the job, that he actually doesn't want the players to walk out to the post-horn gallop anymore. He said he's going to bring his own music. And we've actually got a copy of that here. That is what we'll be walking out to if we have this clown in charge. We've just got rid of a clown. Are we going to replace him with another clown? Look. That was in Football League World today. I don't know if any of you saw it. Leicester City must steer clear of Gary O'Neill. While he was in charge of Wolves, he had the worst defensive record in the Premier League last season. Now, to say that, we had Ruud van Nistelrooy in our defence, that's going some. We'll come on to that later, but, that is... we want to improve. We don't want to get worse. And what Matt Piper said on the football podcast for the BBC, Leicester are scraping the barrel in the management hunt. Is that not true? Well, I think it is. When you look at those three contenders there, and I know I have sort of spoke up in favour of Sean Dyche, but he's not my favourite. But look at that on the left. Does that face? What does that face of Gary? Could you look at that on a Monday morning, wet in December, and get inspired? It inspired to hang yourself from the top of Seagrave, wouldn't it? No, just no. I'm not going to say any more. I tell you what. Let me ask my best mate. What do you think we should get Gary O'Neill in?
Oh God, please, no.
Exactly. And this is Gary O'Neill. This is his record. He's 2-5 on favourite at the moment, although, as Ant has just informed me, thank you very much, Ant, John Percy has just tweeted, 11 minutes ago, former QPR head coach Marty Cifuentes is emerging as a strong contender to take over at LCFC. Admired by Leicester board for some time and has held talks. Cifuentes left QPR by mutual consent at the end of last season. The only thing about Gary O'Neill over Cifuentes, it's a fucking easier name to say. He's not actually working at the moment, Gary O'Neill, so he's the cheap option. that is one thing in his favour. Obviously, Wolves and Bournemouth, he's been manager at. His average management length of term is 1.32 years, but he is young. According to Transfer Market, his preferred formation is 3-4-2-1. Trophies he's won as a manager, sweet, fat, nothing. And Wolves, well, that's his win percentage, 31.7, 28% at Bournemouth, one of the lowest of the managers that we are looking at. I want to say hello to Matthew, and I just want to bring this comment up because it was posted before the comments went live. Hi, Chris and team, and a big hello to Craig, the chairman of the Gary O'Neill Appreciation Society. Yeah. I think we may just get a bit of nice things said by him. But let's bring everybody in. Probably the longest introduction in history. Let's do it, and let's talk Gary O'Neill. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening, Chris. Good evening.
Christopher.
Good. Welcome along, Craig, from up the... Is it up the channels in all departments, Craig?
No, up the cherries in all departments. Up the cherries in all departments.
When your own presenters don't know the name of your channel, that's a bit bad.
But yes.
We've got Ant in as well. Ant, who like me, has come in red.
Yeah.
All right, Ant.
Yeah, all good, man.
Have you got something you'd like to show everybody?
Oh,
you mention
it. No, but you mention it.
No, I thought I'd mention it now and get it out of the way.
Mother.
What is going on?
I was happy to sit here till what the end of the show would be like this, to be honest. Quite proud.
And Ross, hey, welcome along for the first time. Nice to have you on, mate.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate it, Christopher. I
see your name.
Yes. it technically is a Sunday in a way. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Brilliant. No, thanks for coming on. And I'm sure that we will at some point have Sheffield mentioned at least 10 times during the episode. Can I just say, does anybody remember that? I think it was possibly the London Marathon, but there was a woman in the London Marathon. I think it was a woman that sort of went down a side street, got in a car, drove towards the end, waited for a few to go past, and then popped out. I'm sure that's what Ant did, because when he sent me a picture at the end of the race, he had not got a bead of sweat on his face, or any mud for that matter.
I wish that was true. It sounds a lot easier, but unfortunately, if you have a look on my Twitter, there's about 25 pictures of me covered in mud, regretting my life decisions.
There you go, ladies. That's where you need to get over to. First of all, we'll come to you in a second, Craig, because we're obviously going to talk Gary O'Neill. But I just want to quickly go to Ant and Ross first. Ant, Martin Cifuentes, does he appeal?
Yeah, I like what he's done at QPR. He seems like a decent manager, but it's also... I put him and Danny Roll and probably Gary O'Neill in the same bracket. Whoever you get out of those is a roll of the dice now. It's like...
Oh.
And I think you were being a bit harsh on Gary O'Neill at the start, to be honest.
No, I just do not want Gary O'Neill.
No! God! No! God, please, no! No!
No, he's not my first choice, but whoever comes in now, like, I think it's got to be back. And it's almost...
No.
I'm sounding like a happy clapper and I hate it. But, like, there's been so much negativity. It's like, I'm trying to look at the positives of who comes in. And it's like, with Gary O'Neill, you look at what he's done at Bournemouth. You look what he did at Wolves in terms of developing you, improving players. Yes, it's the end, but he's like, I think there's enough there to get behind. And to be honest, yeah, we are scraping the barrel here, but it's just desperation at this point. I want something to get behind, something to be positive about.
Ross, first of all, Cifuentes, another name that's just come out, and it's like I said at the start, it's Tuesday, it must be Belgium. But Gary O'Neill, I mean, why? Why?
Do you know what? I reckon there's a couple of things that could benefit this. It's like the old Russell Martin situation. I was there at Bournemouth away. Obviously, Craig will take great pleasure in winning us 2-0 there. And after, obviously, at half time, Jeff Peters put about Russell Martin going to be at Leicester. And let's just say some of the fans didn't like him, call him a banker. Well, it rhymes with banker anyway. And I was like, oh dear. I mean, literally, I never thought he was coming, and then he ends up at Rangers. So maybe it was just one of them where the agents, the manager's agents throws the name in the hat, gives it to the paper, they sell the story, and then next minute we're all here having debates about Gary O'Neill, or maybe Sean Dyche or Chris Wilder or Danny Roll or Sheffield FC's manager or John Rudkin as manager or Final Whistle's manager. It's just, at the end of the day, you give a name to the papers and they will literally say they're in the frame for it.
Yeah.
So
I've got to say, Scott, I like Scott's thinking there. Well done, but I think the mud has affected your thinking. I think that is so true. Craig, look, I have said the other day that whoever is the manager, what we need to do is get behind him.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. I will get behind any manager that we appoint except Gary O'Neill.
Why?
I'm not going to say that I will not support him or whatever, but the first mistake he makes, I will be down on him like a ton of bricks. That is how little I want that. I'd sooner have Peter Taylor back, and he was fucking awful.
No, there's a Patata Peeler, man, and there's only one worse manager than Patata Peeler, and that was Ruben Nistelrooy. So there you go.
Craig, tell me why should I support this man?
Chris, he is a fantastic manager. He is a good manager who actually was a victim of his own success at AFC Bournemouth. So let's go back to when we was promoted.
You guys might want to get a book now, by the way.
Right.
Craig can talk a bit.
Right. No, it's all factual. So let's go back to when we was promoted under Scott Parker. So very young team, was backed to a certain extent by Maxim Denham in the transfer window. Of course, Maxim knew at this time about Bill Foley, of course, wasn't going to invest tons and tons and tons of money because he was going to sell, but gave Scott a bit to play with. Scott obviously got the ump when, he didn't, invest more money. And basically, we beat Villa in our first game of the season. Got beat by Man City up at the Etihad. No disgrace in that. And then it was the Arsenal and the Liverpool games. And to be fair, we sat back. We went 2-0 down quite quickly against Arsenal. And then against Liverpool, we all know what happened. We got humped 9-0. It was an absolute shambles, an absolute embarrassment. Scott Parker, to be honest, I feel for Burnley because if he does the same for Burnley...
But talking about Gary O'Neill...
But
O'Neill.
Here we go. This is where it is. So Scott Parker's thrown this team under the bus. He's moaned about them and whinged about them and made it all about them and their fault. This young team, we haven't got enough, so thrown Maxim under the bus as well. Gary O'Neill's come in and he's turned the tide pretty much straight away. In fact, from that game against Liverpool all the way to our defeat against Southampton, every other team in the Premier League had been beaten. And that is outstanding if you think, this is a newly promoted team. This is a team that's very young. This is a team that's devoid of confidence. It's a team that's devoid of experience. And he's managed to keep them going for that long and getting results on a week-by-week basis. And every other team, including Liverpool, including Man City, including everybody else, had been beaten at least once. He did have a little slump. No doubt about that. He did have a little slump, and he did sometimes look void of some answers. However, and this is the big thing, he managed to turn that around. Towards the end of the season, the win against Leeds, we were safe. We were safe with about 4 games to go. At one point, we looked dead and buried. He got that win against Liverpool at Dean Court, which was a hard-fought
Yeah.
win. Considering we'd got humped by them 9-0 earlier in the season,
Yeah.
we'd gone and beaten them 1-0 at home. And I think he was a victim of his own success. He was victim of.
Okay, Craig, going to give somebody else a chance to get a word in. Sorry, mate, your answers. I appreciate what you're saying.
I just think that you shouldn't be overly critical. I'm going to comment a little bit later on about his time at Wolves, because I've got my own philosophy, and I've looked into, and I've spoken to Talking Wolves, and I've looked into what happened there. And again, I don't think it's all Gary O'Neill's fault. However, Wolves have obviously made the right decision, as it's now shown that we made the right decision ourselves.
So on that Gary O'Neill, let's be honest. But Gary O'Neill's Bournemouth only beat Leicester. Come on, we had Danny Ward in goal. Let's be honest. I was there that game. It took me only 14-hour trip down. It was a long journey. But
via Scotland.
No, the trains were on strike and that, and I had to set off at like midnight and stuff. So yeah, it was a horrible journey getting down there. So, but bloody Gary, no, please don't Gary Neal.
You say I like you now, Ross. And I mean, this is the man, and we've got to look at how he left the clubs that he leaves. Yes, he followed Scott Parker, and you could say, was he better than Scott Parker? Yes, in fairness, he probably was. But as caretaker manager of Bournemouth, he had 12 games in charge. He won 4. As permanent manager, he had 25 games in charge. He won 7. So basically, out of 37 games, he only won 11. Do we not want somebody with a better record than that?
That's the Premier League record, though, isn't it, for Gary O'Neill? I think when you put that in the context of being a newly promoted team, it's not actually that bad.
I don't like you anymore.
No, I agree with Ant. I agree with Ant completely. It's not bad at all. To be fair, Matt makes a very, very good point. The last 4 games, including that game against Everton at the last game of the season, which unfortunately relegated Leicester and kept the Toffees up, was an absolute shambles. I've got to be honest, that Everton game was a complete and utter shambles. Everton should have been in the Championship, had we pulled our, socks up. But yeah, I agree with Ant. For a newly promoted team, devoid of confidence, devoid of that, know-how in the top flight. Remember, a lot of players like Steve Cook, a lot of the players who was there before had left the club by this time. A lot of them had been poached, like Nathan Ake, Callum Wilson, those sort of players. A lot had retired. The thing is that is a very, very good record, considering, we weren't in a great place for the majority of that season.
No, you were. But Ross, when I look at that end of that season, so the first game was the first game against Leicester. Was that his first game as caretaker manager, or was it the Fulham game? Do you remember, Craig, what his first game was?
His first game was against Wolves. Wolves, a 0-0 draw at Dean Court, which, to be honest, after being humped 9-0, is probably the best result that you could get. And then we went and won. So, to be honest, I honestly think that Gary O'Neill turned it round straight away. And I've met the guy as well. I have met Gary O'Neill, and I'm not just saying this because I like the man personally, but from what he said to me, sadly, it was when I was going around the stadium with Al Garda, dearly departed friend. What he said to us that day was very much his philosophy, how astutely he looks at the teams. We was playing Brentford that weekend, and he was watching Brentford, how if they do this, we do this, how we react, how we manage the game.
Let's have a look. Ross, welcome back. Let's have a look at that end of that season. So they beat us 1-0, having lost to Brighton 2-0. They beat Spurs 3-2, fair enough. West Ham stuffed them 4-0. They beat Southampton, who got relegated with us. They beat Leeds, who got relegated with us. So these aren't great wins you're getting. And I'm we're saying whether the Premier League teams or not. That you've beaten the 3 teams that went down, and then you lost all right to Chelsea, Palace, Man United, and Everton. That may be a bit hard, but you've got to look at the teams that they're playing, Ross, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, to be honest, you say about Gary, we're saying this, Gary not the best of options, but he did do the double over us. So
on a season we went down though.
That's the point. That's the point.
Sorry, 1 second, Craig. I know Ant wants to say. Sorry, Craig, mate. Did you want to add something, Ant?
Yeah, you say about those that they lost the last 4 games, and you say about the teams that they beat. There's 2 things about. A, they got across the line, so however they did it, by hook or crook, he got over the line. Also, by the time that they played those last 4 games, they were mathematically safe, so the pressure's off, and it's almost they've achieved what their goal was.
So I'm just trying to confirm. It was after the 9-0, wasn't it, that Gary O'Neill took over?
Yeah,
that was the Wolves game on the 31st of August, which was game number
5. The 5th game of the season, to be honest.
I keep getting notifications.
Very, very good odds. You would have got very, very, very good odds if you'd said Scott Parker was going to get sacked at that early in the season. To be honest, he wouldn't have if he shut his mouth.
So we took over from you when you were 16, and you finished the season 15th.
Yeah, but at the same time, if we had stayed with Scott Parker after a 9-0 drubbing, we wouldn't have drawn against Wolves. We wouldn't have gone on that run. We would have been beaten by Brentford. We would have been beaten by yourselves. We would have been beaten by most teams. And to be honest, Gary O'Neill kept us in the Premier League. It was always going to be difficult that season. A newly promoted side, a lot of the players hadn't played at this level before. You had the likes of Lewis Cook, Adam Smith, and so on and so forth. But, there wasn't a great deal of players who had played at this level previously. And, he did a job. I was very disappointed, like Matt makes out, and, Matt has said on the chat, that in those last 4 games, yes, we did take our foot off the pedal. And to be honest, we should have beaten Everton. And I do apologise for that, to Leicester fans, because no, we should have beaten. Chris, there is no denying we should have beaten Everton. 100%. 100%. They were there for the taking. They weren't very good. And we had completely ended up on the beach. And let's be honest, there's not a beach in Liverpool. There's shit ones, but there's not a beach in Liverpool. So most of the players were and their heads were back here when they were up in Merseyside. So, but we got ourselves across the line, and that's the whole thing. We might have beaten Southampton twice, we might have beaten Leicester twice, but the whole point is actually beating those teams and getting the results. We did have spells, in some games, like the 4-3 defeat by Leeds up at Elland Road. We had that game, which, was end to end. And actually that segues a little bit into what I'd like to say about Gary O'Neill at Wolves.
Hang on to that thought for a minute then, Craig.
Yeah.
And Craig's making some good points here, not going to deny it. And obviously a lot of what I am doing is is playing devil's advocate. I've said whoever comes in at the start, it's a 3-year contract. Maybe stabilises this season. Next season possibly get us promoted, and the 3rd season just keep us up. One of the things I said when we appointed Scott Parker was that not Scott Parker, sorry, my God. When we appointed Steve Cooper, one of the things I said was we just need to finish 17th to stay up. Now, is that, I mean, am I being unfair then? Because if Gary O'Neill can get us to that position, should we be happy?
I think so, and I also think whoever comes in, whether it's Danny Roll, Gary O'Neill, or whoever it is, I think they need a bit of grace because it's not their fault that the shit show that the club's in. So there's gonna be ups and downs with whoever it is. So I think we've.
So I've got some little bit of not breaking news, but obviously I've just seen that's why I came off because everyone kept ringing me. So I've just seen on I'll put it this way. So the final whistle, obviously a mate of ours, is put Martin, however you pronounce his name, Cifuentes, is it? Is that how you pronounce it? Yeah. Emerging as a strong contender to take over at Leicester, admired by Leicester board for some time, and he has held talks.
But yeah, I mean, which was what John Percy was saying, earlier. But just go, sorry, and go what I was going to say now.
Sorry, Chris.
That's all right. No. If he keeps us up, is that job done though, isn't it, Ant?
Not this season, not keeping us up in the Championship.
No, but if he gets us
back
up
into the Premier League, and then keeps us up, absolutely.
And Ross, I mean, as I say, devil's advocate here, he's had no Championship experience. I mean, you could say that actually works in his favour, but he hasn't had the experience at this level. When you're looking at the likes of Sean Dyche, the likes of Chris Wilder, Cifuentes, Roll, they've all had Championship experience.
You could say the same about Enzo Maresca. Didn't have any Championship experience at all, and obviously took us up. First time I've asked him. I know this is going back a while, but Nigel Pearson's first season in the Championship, that was his first ever season in the Championship. Did okay.
No, I think he was in the Championship with Southampton.
Oh, for about 4 games, but all right, that's all because he sent us down. No, I'm on about a full season, like the start of the season. But so obviously, whoever it is, whoever it's going to be, Chris Wilder, and obviously a lot of people have disregarded Mr. Wilder. Now, I personally, Danny Roll is my number one, and I've said it. I remember going on Radio Sheffield. There you go. This first time. Back in November before Ruben Nistelrooy came in, I went on
27 minutes, mate. 27 minutes.
I went on and I said, you know what? It wouldn't surprise me if we looked at Danny Roll as manager. Now, at the time, Sheffield Wednesday were doing really well at that point. And obviously, we ended up giving it to Rue. But I'm glad he didn't come at that point because obviously he could have done same as Rudy could have done, whichever.
Yeah.
And obviously, he'll get the fans going, all together against. We're all distant at the minute. We're all like a toxic relationship, and obviously he's basically he'll be like a marriage counsellor. He will, get people sat together, talking things through, and having a good, trying to build back what Enzo started. Because Enzo got the fans behind us. Yes, his football wasn't great. I loved it. I don't care what anybody says. I loved Enzo Ball. It doesn't matter if it was boring Leicester or whatever. We won games. We got promoted. We won the champ. That was the goal. The goal is to win games. The goal is to get the up, and we did that. Yeah, obviously we gave Leeds and Southampton Ipswich a little bit of new hope, but obviously, as I say, Leicester City strikes back. So obviously, if it is Roll, brilliant. If not, my second choice would be Wilder, based on the fact that you were saying about experience there, Christopher. He got Sheffield United promoted in 2018-19. He got, I know it's League Two. He got Northampton promoted to League One, and then he went to Sheffield United, got them out of League One, got them out of the Championship. And he's a no-nonsense manager, meaning he'll say how it is, and that is the thing. If we did get Chris Wilder, and he'd said something that the board didn't like, would they get rid of him?
Well, Craig, just looking now at oh my God, my mind is going at Gary O'Neill. He took over at Wolves from Lopetegui, who obviously also lost his job last season at
Yes.
West Ham, after Lopetegui had left due to disputes with the board. Tell me, what can we expect from Gary O'Neill as a manager?
Well, it's quite interesting what Ross has said there with regards to, Danny Roll and, of course, what he's done at Sheffield Wednesday. And to be honest, you can't take anything away from him. But, Gary O'Neill is a little bit like that. Marriage counsellor, I would say he's the one. I don't know if you've ever had it, a bonkers ex-girlfriend. Gary O'Neill is the one calming it all down. Yes, shouldn't do that. Shouldn't, just calming it down, putting it all back in together, into place. And let's be honest, Lopetegui left Wolverhampton Wanderers, I think it was 3 days before the season was due to kick off. Great time in there, Lopetegui. Wolves were favourites to go down in most people's minds. Jeff Shee is an absolute head case, charging Wolves fans ridiculously through the nose and selling a lot of players like Ruben Neves and so on and so forth. How they're going to do next year, I don't know, because they've sold even more players. I think it might be a never-ending cycle with them, and their current manager might also struggle because of Jeff Shee. But Gary O'Neill went in there, he calmed everything down. And at one point when we played them, I spoke to Johnny Williams, of course, from Sky Sports. He's a Wolves fan. And I turned around to him because I'd done the maths. Wolves could have been 6th in the Premier League had those VAR decisions gone for them. Now, don't get me wrong, not every single one was VAR mistakes. However, there was a high proportion, and you could really feel for Gary O'Neill every single bloody week. It was like, there's a problem with VAR. This shouldn't have happened. And then you've got Michael Owen and the other guy on there going, oh no, actually Wolves are right on that, and hence the reason why Wolves petitioned to get rid of VAR. Gary O'Neill come in, calmed it all down, and did a good job and took Wolves forwards. What happened, to be honest, earlier on or last season, is of course Gary O'Neill lost his job at Wolverhampton Wanderers. I think it was the right call to make. Anybody who says it was the wrong call to make is barking mad, because you look at what the new manager did and how he turned it around and how he got them out of that situation. But again, a lot of it was born from Jeff Shee. A lot of it was players being sold from underneath Gary O'Neill's nose. A lot of disharmony, a lot of upset. George Mendes.
While that is going on, though, what was they with all right, Mr. Shee, whoever, whatever. But Gary O'Neill is having to work with that. Yeah. Is he the sort, or is he a calming father figure that will, if he's got problems with players, will go up and put an arm around them and what have you, or is he
100%. He is a calming figure. He is somebody who will listen to the player, understand the player, make sure the player understands him, make sure. To be honest, I couldn't, from meeting Gary O'Neill in person, and of course,
I worry when you say to be honest, because I know you're going off at a tangent.
In the changing room, it might be completely different. But Gary O'Neill in person was very, very, very calm, and I can't see how he would hold.
All I'll say is, Craig, I met Ian Holloway and Craig Levine in person, and they were very nice people, but they were still totally shit managers.
Gary O'Neill is not a shit manager. He's not. He has been given 2 really tough jobs, taken over from Scott Parker, newly promoted side, tasked with keeping us up. He managed to do it, and hence the reason we are where we are now. The right decision was made to replace him with Iriola. Wolves, again, he had to weather the storm. 3 days before the season kicked off, Lopetegui had thrown in the keys. Gary O'Neill's task was to keep Wolves up. He managed to do it. Had Gary O'Neill still been manager, would he have kept Wolves up? I think he probably would have, but I think it would have been a little bit closer.
So I want to point out something about Gary O'Neill's time at Wolves. They were below Leicester before he got the sack.
Yes.
And then obviously they sacked. I knew this would happen. When he got sacked before they played Leicester, I said, Wolves will beat us. It's that manager bounce in it, you know. And then they brought that geezer in. I can't pronounce his name, so. And then, the writing was on the wall anyway. When I saw the team sheet, Ruud van Nistelrooy is put the goalkeeper, a certain goalkeeper in net, and the first thing I said when I found that, I said we're losing 3-0, and we did. So that if that was an opportunity for Gary O'Neill to get a win, it would have been that beforehand. But it's just you were saying to touch then, Christopher, about Holloway. Come on, we had about 41, 42 players that hardly anybody knew. We had Martin Allen, then we had Gary Megson. So
I was just saying it to make the point, though. That nice.
I felt for him. Obviously, he was the manager that we got relegated. But just a little fact about that season.
In the Premier League, so he wasn't bad. But
just a little fact about that season when we got relegated to League One. We scored the fewest goals in that season, but we conceded the second least in that season as well. Even though we finished 22nd, we conceded the second least amount of goals, which is mad.
And if you're still with us, no, sorry, Craig, and sat there, I think you're going to fall to sleep in a minute. And let me bring you in. Is he a bit of a risk, Gary O'Neill? I'm not saying that he may not come through and what have you, but is he too much of a risk for where we are now? Because if we get this appointment wrong, we could do a Luton and go straight back down. Do we need somebody that is not in my eyes, is not such a risk?
He is a risk, but I think he's no more of a risk than anyone else is, to be honest. I think Danny Roll, who seems to be the flavour of the month and everyone wants, yes, he's done well at Sheffield Wednesday, but very different circumstances and very different expectations there. Same with Martin Cifuentes. And everyone goes on about Sean Dyche and how he's a safe pair of hands. Whilst I hear that, when's the last time he actually managed in the Championship? That's over a decade ago now, isn't it?
It was, if I remember correctly, it was the year we got promoted with Burnley.
So it's not, and let's be honest, the Championship's moved on a lot since then.
Oh, yeah. Is that Cifuentes on what's it called? The barbecue gardening leave, what do we call it?
I'm not sure, but apparently he's sorting out his own compensation.
Oh, so no, and when I heard it when he was on the back garden leave, I was like, okay. So
yeah, he's left QPR now. I think it was some mutual termination. But just very quickly, Chris, if I must, Ross brought up a very, very interesting point there. When, of course, you played Wolves and Wolves did beat you, and it was straight after Gary O'Neill had been sacked. Dare I say it? Leicester made a very silly mistake themselves at that point, because Steve Cooper, of course, was sacked. And then, of course, Ruud van Nistelrooy come in. And that was the turning point for Leicester as well. I know that there was a lot of Leicester fans that weren't really behind Steve Cooper at the start. However, the thing is he would have made a lot more of a fist of it. And I think he would have kept Leicester up.
Well, quite possibly, but that was then. And the now is that it's Gary O'Neill who's in the frame today. So let's try and get back onto Gary O'Neill. A young coach with full potential, it says. Gary O'Neill is a young coach with potential. O'Neill has had 2 managerial roles in his short coaching career, and they've both come into the Premier League, which is obviously a positive. He had kept Bournemouth's side in the top flight, despite many of them tipping them for relegation, before overachieving with Wolves. He has said, Craig, that he is a head coach. He will always be a head coach. So he's going to come in, and he's not going to come in as a manager and having a say on everything. He just wants to concentrate on the football. Was that how he was at Bournemouth?
To be honest, what was happening at Bournemouth was Richard Hughes and Simon Francis were bringing in the players. They were finding the players. They had a demographic of who they were going to bring in. And Gary O'Neill worked with them very much like Andoni Iraola does, picks out certain positions, and then those guys go out and find the best talent. And they've been really successful at doing that. However, Chris, the one other thing you've got to think, though, is if you have got a Jeff Shee in charge, like he did at Wolves, somebody who probably, and of course, George Mendes had left Wolves at this point, or wasn't working with Wolves. So, who was excellent at finding some great Portuguese talent. God rest his soul, Diego Jota being one of those, Ruben Neves, Matthias Cunha, all these players, that he brought in. If the setup is not right at Leicester, and he says, look, I want a midfielder who can do this, do that, play across the, can go into a defensive position, can make sure, he provides a little bit of added protection, but can also move it forwards. If he goes to, say, for example, Top and says that, the problem is if Top hasn't got the right people doing the scouting, doing that work, they could hand Gary O'Neill a lemon, effectively. So that is the danger with regards to this. We were very lucky. We still are very lucky because we had that succession planning. Gary O'Neill will work with what he's got. He won't go out and find the next talent. He probably can suggest to him, but I think he's done a fantastic job at the two clubs.
This next bit this is the same article where they were saying young manager with potential. Wolves' lack of defensive organisation could concern the Leicester City hierarchy. We know from last season that our defence was absolutely shit. More holes in it than a colander. But in the 16 Premier League games before he was sacked, Wanderers recorded one shutout and they conceded a remarkable 40 goals, which left them in 19th place with just 9 points as relegation looked upon a possibility. Staggeringly, half of those goals came via set plays, which is always a bad look for a manager, and even the dismissal of a set-piece coach just months after he joined didn't change things on that front. The team lacked organisation, they didn't respond to his methods, and he lacked the authority to change things as the same mistakes were repeated. Not a good CV for him, is it?
Well, no, that's definitely a negative. But you know what that reminds me of? When it went south at the end with Brendan Rodgers? That sounds like deja vu with that. If you remember how bad it was every time there was a ball coming into the box, I wanted to close my eyes and cry.
Yeah, the stupid zonal marking. Every time there was a set piece from a corner, we were basically saying who's getting on the hand, the opposition player, who's going to score from this corner. And when we didn't concede from a corner, we celebrated like we just won league. So, yeah.
But is it that way? But Ross, does that not then worry you that when you look at us from last season, one of our main areas of concern was our defence? And my worry is if we've still got the likes of Cody, Vestergaard and Wout Faes at the club next season, they are not three defenders that I would feel confident that Gary O'Neill could go in and sort out, having just read that.
Oh, well, I mean, Faz, I mean, I don't the fact that he's a professional footballer speaks for it. I mean, I don't know how. Is he done an Ali Dyer at Southampton? I don't know. Is he frauded his way into playing football? It's ridiculous. Connor Cody spends more time at radio than he does playing. I mean, Akoli, obviously, there is signs there, Akoli. He's still very young, Akoli.
But would you feel confident, having me just read that out, would you feel confident with Gary O'Neill looking after our defence and sorting our defence out, which needs sorting out?
Personally, no. But it is what it is. Personally, no. I don't think it, not at all.
No. Craig, 2 points, and if you can sort of keep on point with it. Preferred formation, it says here. Now, again, this is transfer market, so it could be completely wrong. 3-4-2-1. Is that his preferred style?
Yeah, it is. is we did play under Gary O'Neill with this very fluid attacking sense, like we do under Andoni Iraola. To be honest, Andoni Iraola's taken up one step because, of course, the high press. Gary O'Neill never did that. He did more of controlling, can go to a back five. But yeah, it was very, very fluid. And to be honest, it was never really boring. It was never really boring unless, the most boring game of all was the Liverpool game where we actually beat them 1-0 because we had to control that, very, very closely and defend for our lives at points. So, yeah, that's how he plays.
And what's he like with? And I'm dreading asking this. What's he like with the youth? Because it's a thing that everybody is pinning on these managers. Because if next season we get a transfer embargo, a management plan, the young players we might have to rely on. But we've said this with so many managers before. Oh, they're so good with the youth, and we don't fucking see the youth. At Bournemouth, what was he like with the youth?
He was very, very good. The players that, we had on our books, like Jordan Zamora, we had Jaden Anthony, we had players, that had been recently promoted with us. But also, actually the players that was brought into the club as well, he was very, very good with. He did bring them on. I would say that Iraola is in a completely different league. We have got possibly one of the best managers in Europe at this point in time. In my honest opinion, we're not going to keep him for much longer. I'm sure of that. But at the same time, Gary O'Neill was a lot better than Scott Parker was with the youth. He was also very, very astute in how he used them. And yeah, I think he's the ideal manager for somebody like Jeremy Monga, who will be, of course, quite an integral part of Leicester getting back into the Premier League. And I think, he would work very, very closely with a player like that to get the very best out of them. But not just that, for their future career as well. So, yeah, you'd be in safe hands with Gary O'Neill, even though you might not think it at this point in time.
Ross, was it yourself or Ant that was about to say something? No, did I miss it?
No, is it about? Jeremy Monga, obviously. Whoever the manager comes in, Gary O'Neill, or anybody, they need to look after the youth. And obviously, we go on about it, but it's about they're the future. I know we've got. I get it. You need experience, but you need to intertwine it. So obviously, if we're going to have Ben Nelson at the centre back, maybe an experienced in defender. I mean, Ben Nelson last season was Oxford's best player. So I just hope if it is Gary O'Neill, obviously we're going to back him. Of course we are. We're going to have to. We've got no choice. If we do, we've got to. In the day, we don't always get what we want in life, I want £1 million, but that ain't going to happen. So, yeah, obviously if we get him, we get him. I'm not just going to say it because I'm going to get something to eat. I'm starving, mate.
Yeah, no problem. I'll be rounding it up.
What I will say, obviously, just on that Gary O'Neill front. Obviously, if he comes in, we've got to back him and stuff, and hopefully he can bring. I mean, that's the word philosophy. I tell you that is the most used word in 2025. Philosophy this, philosophy that. I might just say if he's good at football or not. Formation. It does me head in that. I mean, when someone talks, I'm thinking philosophy. Are we in sociology or something or science? It just annoys me, that word. I don't know what it is.
It is that now, isn't it? Look, I'll let you go, Ross. Thanks very much for popping on.
No problem.
All the best, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, see you soon. Take care, lads.
Okay, guys. Go. And I just want to bring up what I'm not sure if this is going to work or not. No, it's not. Let me go back to. Let me go back there. There we go. We'll do that. Matt, who is another presenter on Up the Cherries in All Departments, actually says didn't see much development with our youth. Those you mentioned there were already in the first team or on the fringes. Parker brought some more and Anthony into the team when we were promoted. And we've got this. I mean, I could turn and say, well, I'm not going to mention any certain people that are good with youngsters, but you know, you can't rely totally on youngsters, but we've heard it all before. This guy's going to concentrate on the youngsters. Cooper was the manager of the under-17s for England when they won the Euros or World Cup, whatever it was. And then he bought all old players.
He was. I'd say the one thing that I would say to defend Gary O'Neill with this is when you're in a relegation battle, you do need that level of experience. Unfortunately, the experience we relied on was absolute dog shit experience, whereas with Gary O'Neill, the experience he relied on was players that are still were capable of doing a job. So then, in that situation, when you're already performing at the expected level, to then try and put in youth players is very difficult. I think in a championship season, over a 4-6 game season, when we don't have a huge amount of quality of experienced players, it should be a bit easier to integrate that youth.
Craig, I want to go back to his, because like I said, the defence was a huge problem for us last year. I just want to carry on with what Football League World was saying. Overall, that means O'Neill's Wolves side kept clean sheets. Overall, that means O'Neill's Wolves side, so he kept clean sheets in 54 Premier League games while he was in charge. They will rightly point out the defence was... Sorry, I never get this right. Sorry, I thought that was wrong. He kept 6 clean sheets in 54 Premier League. He didn't keep 54 clean sheets. He kept only 6. I'm going to say I'll have him now. 6 clean sheets in 54 Premier League games. They will rightly point out the defence was weak. But the reality is that Victor Pereira came in and kept back-to-back clean sheets immediately. You know, I know, you know...
It's an interesting one what you brought up there, and yeah, to be honest, I think that the ideas had kind of run out, especially when Jeff Shee was selling players over his head during the summer. It was a mess. Wolves were favourites to go down, and to be fair, Gary O'Neill, you look at the games which he won for Wolves. He beat Manchester City. He beat Manchester City with Wolves side, which were tipped to go down. He nearly got beat Manchester United. There was all these games that he did very, very well. And like I say, they could have been sixth had they got all those goals given to them. Don't get me wrong. That second season, when Wolves, we went up there and absolutely annihilated them. They were good going forwards. They were a threat going forwards. They had Matthias Cunha up front. What's his name? Larson. Von Larson. They were a threat going forwards. However, defensively, they were poor. I just want to come on to Matt's comment as well, because he did make a point about the development of our youth. He is right. Scott Parker brought in Jordan Zamora and Jayden Anthony, but it was really Gary O'Neill who got their heads back off the ground after that Liverpool drubbing. Parker threw that team under the bus. And in fact, it was Gary O'Neill, in my honest opinion, that turned them into Premier League quality players. Jayden Anthony, since that season, has been playing at championship level. Jordan Zamora went off to Italy. I don't think he's pulled up any trees there. So Gary O'Neill's done a good job. However, you have to have the right mentality and the right management and the right, from the owners behind him. And that's a question of Rudkin, that's a question of Top, that's a question of the people who are making the decisions, whether or not they can really, 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 back and support him in the transfer market. So, the figures don't look good. Six clean sheets in 54 is absolutely diabolical. But you've got to look at, the attacking prowess. A bit like, if you probably look, I don't know the figures, I haven't looked at the figures, but if you look at Eddie Howe in our first season in the Premier League, we probably had quite a low clean sheet tally. Matt might be able to pull the figures out of thin air for me, but we probably had but Eddie Howe's philosophy was outscore you. We'll go. We'll play our own game. We'll take the game.
You have to outscore you, but again, we haven't got any strikers at the moment apart from Daka. It was Gary O'Neill, wasn't it, who wanted Daka to go to Bournemouth? I mean, if that's who he
you
was.
never know. He could have turned Patson Daka into a really good player.
Oh, I doubt. I don't think anybody could do that. But I've got to say, when we got relegated last time, we were on our knees, we were down, we were fed up, and then suddenly we were linked. Well, suddenly we'd appointed Enzo Maresca. Now, we didn't think about, how much, how long's he been a manager, what experience has he had? We just looked at it and went, he's sprinkled with pep dust. He was holding the Champions League trophy 6 days ago. Now he's our manager. He gave us that boost that as a fan base we needed. Now, if we were on our knees that time, we are now on our fucking arse. We've gone even lower. We want an appointment that will come in and we will go, yes, this is a pole we can, attach our flag to. This is a guy that's going to really inspire us. We're going to get going. Do any of those three there, but obviously Gary O'Neill we're talking about, do they inspire you to do that?
Not particularly, but I also think the timing with Enzo Maresca was so crucial because we went down and then what was it? About 2 weeks later, he was appointed and stuff was getting put into place straight away. Now, this time, we haven't sold any players. We haven't got a manager. We haven't signed any players. Pre-season started with Andy King last week. Much as I love Andy King, he's in his first year of coaching. I feel like if the timing had been different and whoever our manager was, say, just as a hypothetical, we had appointed Gary O'Neill in the same time frame that we'd appointed Enzo Maresca. We were bringing Gary O'Neill's players in. We could see if there was a direction and a vision like we could when there was Enzo Maresca. I think we'll be looking at this very differently. I think it's also the circumstances around it, of the fact that we've been pissing in the wind for the last 2 months.
Interestingly, Mark just said in our presenter chat that Cifuentes is paying his own get-out fee with QPR. How
when
true that is?
It's a different knot.
Sorry?
When Leicester come, it's a different knot.
Yeah. And interestingly, I'm on the TalkSport bet page and I'm on the manager specials for Leicester. And all I've done is gone in and refreshed it, and it said there are currently no markets available.
Well, that says that something's probably going on in the background. And, if Cifuentes is doing that, you've got to think that he's got another job. Actually, it's very, very interesting because Matt's actually brought that up, and I was just having a little look. And this is AI, but supposedly Eddie Howe achieved 16 clean sheets in his Premier League managerial career with Bournemouth. I think it's a bit higher than that, to be honest. But
maybe we should get Eddie Howe.
But no, the fact is,
I don't want to get onto Eddie Howe, mate, because
no. But what I'm saying is Gary O'Neill, if he's going to play that game and going to go and attack, and it's not necessarily a terrible thing not having the clean sheets. That's the point I'm making. In the Championship, Leicester are going to be one of the better teams. And I can guarantee you, if you play with that style of go for the juggler, go for the throat of teams, I think you'll probably come up trumps more often than not.
Fingers crossed we are. Craig, thank you very much for coming in, mate. I know I take the piss out of you a lot, but
I love it, really, Chris.
That's what buddies do, isn't it?
Exactly.
And sitting proud, looking like Boris Becker there with his headband on. Well done, mate, at doing well in the mudder. What is what?
Tough mudder.
Tough mudder. I want to keep saying motherfucker. I don't know why. But what is happening? What is happening with Leicester? No odds at the moment. Just one last time. Nope, still no odds coming up. I sent you a message in the private chat, guys. Thank you very much for coming on. Look, we'll be talking about 6 different managers over the next 6 days, no doubt. We've all got our personal choice of who we want and then not. And you know what? Whoever we get in ain't going to please everybody. Craig's link is in the description. Up the cherries in all departments.
I'll tell Ollie off for that.
Yeah, you'll never forget that. And thank you very much, mate. And hey, if you've been watching, thanks a lot for watching. Smash that like button, subscribe, and click the notification bell. If you're watching on catch up, what do you think of Gary O'Neill? Do you want him? Put your comments below. And if you've been listening via your favourite podcast platform, thank you very much for listening. All the best, guys. I might be back at 9 o'clock, actually, just seeing how things are going. I will see you later. Thanks, guys, and thanks to everybody in the chat.
Thanks for watching. These videos are tremendous. You better like them too, or I'll be back.
This podcast is proud to be part of the TalkSport Fan Network.
TalkSport. Powered by fans.
That will conclude this evening's entertainment.